When he turned his back from shoulder to shoulder, it looked like as wide as the tailgate of a truck.
And just darkness, literal darkness, just came like all over, just all over me except where I was standing.
This thing let out the most blood-curdling, mind-blowing, spine-tingling scream that you've ever heard in your life, and it cut through me like a knife.
And I knew that they were going to take me. I just knew it. And then the next thing I can remember is being levitated.
Well, when I look in there, I see two big eyes staring back at me.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night.
Talked about, well, what if it's more than theoretical? What if every tetrahedron, every sphere is defined by a tetrahedron, but there's another tetrahedron that's produced, which means that every sphere is a hypersphere. There are two worlds existing simultaneously in the same space that are out of phase with each other. What's interesting is that a lot of folklore and a lot of mythology around the world backs that idea up, the other world, right?
Right.
And that you can enter the other world by stepping in the toadstool ring or going into the barrow mound, or like there's this recurring theme.
Right, these portals.
And so one of the things that he said, and this was before, I think it was it Voyager 2? I think it was Voyager 2 that went past Saturn, that got all the good photos of Saturn. He predicted, he said, well, if my hypersphere idea is true, then based on the energy of it, the energy of a hypersphere in a gaseous giant, you should see a hexagonal shape around the poles. Sure enough, when the Voyager 2 went over the pole of Saturn, there's a hexagonal shape around the pole that's going the opposite direction that the planet is, and is a huge storm. It's like thousands of miles an hour storm that's going on. So there seems to be some, at least circumstantial validity to the idea that spheres are in fact hyperspheres, that every sphere is two. I think that that's what they're talking about, because a lot of what I figured out with the message, it's talking about equilateral triangles defining tetrahedrons, and that the tetrahedron seems to be the double tetrahedron seems to be a central figure to the intersection. That's what creates the intersection. It's two things, two realms meeting and causing a nexus at the center. I don't know if any of that, I'm going to say it this time, I don't know if that makes sense, but.
So this message is essentially an explanation of how they're getting in contact. How they're getting in contact. Yep.
And I think it also speaks to a way to get in contact with them. I think it's actually about a gate. I think it's about, and so I think when I come to a place of completely understanding it, which I'm getting very close to now, like closer than I've been in since 1996. But something else I need to tell you about what happened in 2006, because that was actually a really significant thing. So 2006 was the first time after 1996 that I really had time to sit and think about the message. I was living in Sedona, Arizona, after living in LA for a long time. And I was living in Sedona, and I was sitting on my porch and really, really going down this kind of deep rabbit hole about it. Like, I mean, deep contemplation, to the point where I would sit on my porch, really kind of without doing anything but thinking, for about 6 hours or so. And then, there come a point when I go, boy, I probably should go to the bathroom or something, do something else other than sit here. And I'd look up and it was like I was dreaming. It was like it had created a euphoria. I had disassociated myself with the level of depth of thought. Anyway, I had this epiphany. Are you familiar with Chaco Canyon?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I've been there a few times. I've been fascinated by it, especially the Sundagger calendar was of great interest to me. I could take you through the Sundagger calendar. It is probably one of the most amazing paleo calendars in the world. Its operation is so bizarre. The fact that someone figured this out, I still have trouble wrapping my head around. Just for the sake of the people listening to the podcast, I'll run you through it because it's quickly. So it's on top of something called the Fajada Butte. There are 3 slabs of stone that have been arranged in a slightly tipped stack leaning against the wall, this rock wall. If you go underneath it, there is a spiral cut into the wall underneath these 3 stones. And the spiral has 19 turns on it. On one side of it, on the left side, a little bit up to the left, there is a little secondary spiral. In 1977, a woman who was out there to do photography climbed up on top of Fajada Butte just about noontime, and she saw these slabs and she looks under them, and there was a dagger of light that came right down through the middle of the spiral at high noon. Well, it was also the summer solstice, the day that she was there. So she said, okay, wow, this is kind of cool. And so she came back over a period of time and realized that on the autumn equinox, 2 little daggers of light came down the outside of the spiral. Now understand, the logistics of making stones do this over a period of time with noonday sun, that is an engineering feat in itself. The fact that they got 2 daggers to come down on the side, 1 dagger to come down in the middle. The winter solstice was 1 dagger, and I think a little dagger of light went through the little spiral on the side.
Mm-hmm.
The spring equinox was the 2 daggers and the little dagger of light through the spiral. So already it's marking solstices and equinoxes since at least 870 AD. Since at least 870 AD, it's been doing this without fail because it's still accurate.
Right.
Now, and you know that there's something called precession, which is the tip of the axis of the Earth over a period of time. I think it's a 26,000 year cycle, something like that. Completely changes our North Star because with the, it's Polaris, but then it becomes there's another star. Anyway, so precession doesn't even seem to affect this thing. Like it's been doing this every year since at least 1870, probably before that. Well, then she was puzzled by the 19 turns on the spiral. And there is a phenomenon with our moon that you might not be aware of. And that is that the moon orbits the Earth, right? It goes around the Earth.
Right.
But there is a wobble in that orbit. It's a wobble of 10 degrees. And it takes 18.65 years for it to go from one extreme back to the other. 18.65 years, 19 turns on the spiral.
Right.
So she came and did a test. On the full moon on the noon position, put a dagger of light through whatever ring of the spiral the year was in of that 18.65 year cycle. So they have a perfectly coordinated solar lunar calendar that marks it not by the horizon, not by the noon position. I can't even get, I say it and my brain wants to pop out of my head. It's just like, it's phenomenal, right?
And all the people that listen to my show that are flat earthers are probably on their head right now.
Well, you know what? It doesn't, it's interesting. I could go down, that's another show. I'm telling you, I've seen a lot of the evidence, and I'm not saying one way or the other, but I can see why they are compelled by the evidence.
Hey, they do have good arguments, don't they? They got a good argument.
They have some really good arguments, and especially the more I learn, even from scientists and other people who have worked in Antarctica and talked about problems with the satellite images and things, that if you sail around Antarctica, it is bigger around than it appears on the map. Yeah, explain that one for me. Anyway, but what's funny is this calendar doesn't actually even eliminate that. In fact, in a way, it would almost support it, because that's a consistency of the sun and the moon that seems to even be outside of precession, right? It seems to, like, anyway, the point is that 2006 happened to be a lunar standstill year. Lunar standstill is when it's going from one extreme to another. There's a period of time when it stops before it starts going back. Those are lunar standstill years, and 2006 just happened to be one of those years. And there, if you look at the message on the left-hand side of the lower set, there's a spiral. There's a little spiral, okay? I was looking at that spiral, and I already knew about Chaco. I'd already been to Chaco. And I was looking at that spiral, and I went, huh, I wonder, just on a whim, okay? Just on a whim, I went, I wonder if there's some significance to this lunar standstill thing. So I started looking up and going back to when the other lunar standstills had happened. 1996, 1977, 78, and I was born 1969 or 68, 69, which was one before that.
Wow.
So literally, they were coming and visiting on lunar standstills, specifically on what are called the minor standstills. Well, 77, 78 was a, so go ahead, sorry.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but when's the next one? Are you going to get a visit?
So well, we had one in 2015, 2016 was the last minor standstill, which would have been the same kind of standstill as the one in 77, 78. So when I realized that they were visiting me on a rhythm, I went, huh, okay, well, that's interesting. So I started really looking into it. And I actually have in a notebook here, I calculated from 2006 back to the turn of the century and 2006 forward to 2024. Just on a whim, I did that. And I cannot believe how consistent ebbs and flows of historical events and personal events follow this rhythm almost to the letter. So what I realized is that there are two kinds of standstill events. There's the major and the minor. The way I like to help conceptualize about them is that if you think of a minor as being like a swell out at sea that could become a wave if it came in to the shore, right? As it gets shallower, it becomes a wave and breaks.
Right.
So think of the minor standstill as a swell, and then the major standstill as the wave that rises and then breaks on the shore. Okay. In between them is a trough, right? Think of waves, right? Amplitude. You have a trough. Well, the trough is this transitional period between them, between the minor and the major. And what I started to realize when I was charting it is that the minor seems to be about inspiration. It's about ideas. So to give you an idea, 77, 78, Star Wars, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, society changing movies. There were a lot of society changing events that happened during that period of time that set things in motion, right? We probably wouldn't have had a Raiders of the Lost Ark or an Empire Strikes Back if we hadn't had all the amazing things that happened in that one short period of time, which was the center of this minor swell.
That's interesting.
And then, now notice, we have Empire Strikes Back, and many people would argue, I use Star Wars as an example. Star Wars was great, in my opinion, Empire Strikes Back is the best of those movies. I think it's the one, it's the most engaging, it's got the most exciting twists in it. And then Return of the Jedi is the stupid teddy bear movie that irritates me. So it goes, think. Well, I realized something. When Empire Strikes Back came out, now remember, Star Wars was being made. It came out in 77, but it was being made from 75 to 77, right? It was in production. The Empire Strikes Back went into production almost as soon as they realized that Star Wars was the phenomenon that it was. So it was already being made, 78, I think, late 77, 78, up to, and it was released in 80. Well, that puts into parentheses, think of it mathematically, that whole period of time, that fits inside of this swell. Well, after the swell, you have a trough. And it turns out that the middle of that next trough was 1983. In other words, Return of the Jedi comes out as the energy is diminishing out of that. And the thing is, there's a lot of things that I like about Return of the Jedi. I love the whole Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Emperor thing, but the teddy bears got to go. I'm just not down with the teddy bears. So, especially when I learned that they were supposed to originally be Wookiees, which would have made a whole lot more sense, right? It's like he just changed them to Ewoks and then didn't change anything that they did, right? Because in your mind, if you think of all the things that Ewoks were doing, right, and then made them Wookiees, yeah, smashing stormtroopers against trees and all that would have made perfect sense.
Right.
He just literally turned them into stupid teddy bears because they were more marketable as merchandise. But anyway, so that was my first little thing. I went, okay, that's interesting. And then it is interesting to note that in can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you. I'm sorry, I muted my phone because it was getting loud back in the living room there.
Okay, I saw the little mute thing and I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah, I just turned my mic off for
me.
a minute because my family's in there watching TV and I could hear it through the wall and I was like, my goodness.
That's all right. I understand. Anyway, the point is that, and there's something I really don't talk about that happened in 1987, which by the way was the following wave. So the wave event was 87 window. And in 87, I had this waking dream experience in the daytime. And I forget about it sometimes just because so many other things were going on. But I was in my apartment and I was married at the time, and my wife and I were taking a nap, and I came into that waking dream state, and I went out into the living room, and there was a little man standing in the room that looked at me, and he talked to me, but it was like him talking was this multitude, like a continuum of voices.
Wow.
Like it was many talking through him. And he looked at me and he goes, okay, you're doing well. You're doing fine. And then I started flying around the room. So, but I forget about that sometimes, but I realized that was probably another visitation where they were seeing what how I was progressing, because it makes perfect sense. It's almost in alignment with what happened when I was 2. It's almost like the same kind of evaluation over again.
Right.
Anyway.
20-year checkup.
So exactly, got to come in and see what's happening. So then the thing happens in 96. Some other things that happened right around that same time, 96, 97. So when I say 96, 97, it's because the lunar standstill actually strayed into both of those years. It wasn't like all in one of them or all in the other. It was sort of covered both. But it's interesting because a movie came out that year that was significant, and that was Contact. And what's the whole message of Contact? It's about a message coming in and them building a machine. Well, I got the message before that movie, before I even knew that movie was coming out. So I got the message in the spring of 96, and that movie came out in 97. So, and I'd never read Carl Sagan's book. I didn't even know that he had a book called Contact. So, anyway, the point is that was another swell. That was the swell, the inspiration, the same kind of event as, the Star Wars year had been. So anyway, then I started really looking into the troughs, because when I went back and looked at the troughs, I also realized that that's when things in my life got crappy. Like I thought of the times where things were crappy. And I went, oh, right in line every time it was during a trough event.
So I find that fascinating, because I think things do come in like a cycle, and I never knew what was leading this cycle, you know?
Yeah.
And this makes sense. I like this.
So to give you an example of a larger scale metric, when I first understood this in 2006, and I did the initial calculations and realized what the rhythm was, I said, well, let me look at the trough events, because at first I thought the trough events were just, when everything was crap, but I realized it's not that. It's that whatever. So think of it this way: the swells seem to be about ideas, inspiration, innovative changes of thought, consciousness, transformation stuff. Then you go through a trough. Well, think of it like an architect, right? An architect makes blueprints. They come up with a plan, they make blueprints. But for the blueprints to become a building, you have to go through the process of putting the blueprints into action, right? So that's what the trough is. It's literally transforming ideas into things, they manifest in some way. So I don't know why I like whatever it says it says respawn on your chair.
Oh yeah, that's the brand name of the chair. It's like it's one of those gamer chairs, but it's got a lot of back support, so I bought one.
It's fantastic though. It's like respawn. It seems, I don't know, it works. Anyway, the point is that the waves seem to be when things manifest. So let me give you a good example of that. When I charted back because I was born in late '68, and that wave event peaked a little bit after that in '69. And I went, okay, so let's chart it back and see if we can actually follow the trend. But scientifically, right? You have to test it. So I decided to test it. I said, okay, so where would we go back? When would be the inspiration swell before that? And I realized it was 59, 60. In other words, it was when Kennedy was elected. What happens when Kennedy's elected? We're going to go to the moon. We're going to, he was going to end Vietnam. I mean, there was all this stuff, very positive stuff that he was about, civil rights, all these things that were going on, right?
Yeah.
And I charted it and I went, okay, so when did we come out of that swell and start going into the trough? 63.
Oh my goodness.
63. And then I go, okay, look, and then that swell, we go into that swell, and what happens? Oh, Vietnam gets worse. We have LBJ going on, and then we got the civil rights movement is getting, the thing with civil rights in the South is getting ugly.
Yeah.
There were riots going on. I mean, it was getting pretty insane, right? Well, then we start to come out, and that was the trough. We start coming out of the trough. What do we got? We've got definitely there's a lot of questions going on about Vietnam at that point. As soon as you get into 60, 65, oh, the Beatles. The Beatles are at the beginning edge of that. So you've got the Beatles, you've got the beginning of flower power, you've got, I'm not saying it was all good times, but the ideas were very positive.
Right.
There was an inspiration to change the world and all those things. Well, then we come up, we're coming right up to this peak. And when does this wave break? Two things happen when this wave peaks. Two things, almost within a month of each other. We land on the moon, if you believe that sort of thing. Right. We land on the moon, and Woodstock. Woodstock was the pinnacle of the flower power thing, right? The peace, love thing. And the moon was the pinnacle of the space race. I mean, That was everything that Kennedy started back then came to its manifest conclusion right at the breaking of that wave. And what happens right after all of that? I mean, right about that, there's one thing that happens, which is Martin Luther King gets assassinated, right? Well, the thing that's interesting is that does happen on the way to the peaking of the wave, but you know what? It really sealed the civil rights movement that he, you know, that he was the great martyr to the cause that basically said, America, you can't go back. There's no going back from this because it's just been, you know, ratified essentially, right?
He was the wake-up call. Yeah, for sure.
It was the wake-up call of where we really were. So anyway, we have, and that really brought, I think it really brought the civil rights movement home in a lot of ways. It said, okay, you know, America's changing. We're landing on the moon. We've got Woodstock. This was the high watermark for a lot of this. Well, then what happens? Not long after that, Bobby gets assassinated. Right?
Yep.
We're going out of that wave. We're going into this trough, into the early 70s. We got Tricky Dick, you know, resigning because in a way that a president never had to that point.
Yeah.
So, and what was weird is that on a personal level, for me, that's also when my dad died, was right during that trough, and it changed. So what it is, it's transformative. What the wave does is it wipes out the old paradigm and it makes way for the new. It's like in alchemy, you call it transmutation. It's a transmutative moment. Well, what I've come to also realize is that swell trough wave process is also that when the wave breaks, a whole new cycle of that starts. So not only does the wave, you know, manifest and then wash away the dreams and aspirations, manifest them and then wash them away, but it actually washes away that whole cycle. Because notice, what else happened right after that? The Apollo missions basically did a couple more runs and it petered out.
Yep.
And that was right during the trough. And we never really brought it back, except for what happened next? The space shuttle. A whole new approach, right? Reusable device. So anyway, the one point I will bring to your attention is that the center of the trough that was between the swell of 96, 97 and the wave of 2006, almost the dead bottom of that trough was 9/11.
Oh my goodness.
Like literally that was September. The bottom of the trough was in October.
Yeah. Well, this whole process, that could be, is there anybody researching this? Like where'd you find out all this? Is this from your own personal research? Like
this is just me figuring it out. And I'm telling you that this is what I'm trying to say. The information that they're sharing with me. Well, and it's weird. Part of the reason they showed me this, and I just realized this like 2 days ago, the reason they were sharing that with me is that it showed a process between two things. Because again, they don't work in linear time. So it doesn't matter to them how long it takes.
Right.
Because how long it takes is not relevant. So what they're really showing me is it's part of the mechanism of this device that they took me inside of. Because it's how, the simplest way I can put this is the way that reality seems to work is it's like a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
That we, okay, I'm just gonna go here, so just roll with me.
Go with it.
So what it is that the way I understand it is that we live in a conceptual reality fantasy. What I mean by that is that we have sensory input, right? Our at least 5 senses, probably 6. There's probably 6 if you want to be honest. Intuition, I would say, is probably a sense to a degree. So we're in this, that information is collected. It goes into our cerebral cortex, and our cerebral cortex, using memory as a kind of a reflector, right? Assembles that information into a fantasy. It's into a fantasy. That color is blue. This is light. That's this far away. I mean, that's what it is. It's completely an illusion in our cerebral cortex. And so I think that the device actually when they put me in the star field, what they did is it wasn't a star field. They were showing me the intersections. They were showing me the field of intersections, which are experiential bubbles that are also choices, right?
Right.
So they were literally, it wasn't stars. They were showing me people, essentially, universes, essentially. So what I realized they were showing me with the swell and the peak thing is they're saying, you imagine a thing. In other words, you're on one side of the tetrahedron looking in the direction of the other tetrahedron. You are imagining things in front of you. You think that you're going forward in time, which is not what's happening. You're just looking at the other side. You're having an idea. It manifests. You go over there. You think it's real. You turn around and look back the other way, and you believe what's next. In other words, it's like putting one foot in front of the other. It's just that it's back and forth. Yeah. It's this high-speed exchange. So we're literally inside a fantasy simulation of our own making. And then I had this thing. I said, well, doesn't that mean that there would be something outside of our sensory bubble, right? There's something that we're experiencing that we're translating into this crap. Until I had this epiphany about 2 days ago. And I went, wait a minute, what if the sensory thing, the sensory experience is not outside, it's actually inside. We're bouncing things off of it and thinking that it's, in other words, we're sensing our own fantasy. And it's going back and forth between the nucleus. Think of it like an atom, right? Mm-hmm. A hydrogen atom is a single proton with an electron going around it, right? That's what one hydrogen atom is. Well, we also know that that is like a shell, right? The way that the electron moves is really more like a shell than a particle. Well, imagine that you are the proton at the center of the hydrogen atom, and that you're looking out at essentially your sensory input. So the sensory input is picking up your delusion and then processing it into the next step of your delusion, like frames in a film. And so what we are is inside of this. And what they did is they let me outside of it to see it, because I realized something. That's ego incarnate. That's exactly what Buddha was talking about. Get out of the wheel, getting out of the karmic constant cycle, going back and forth. If you look at all of these great teachers forever, this is all they've really been saying. Recognize you're in a fantasy of misery of your own making. You are in your own prison. All you have to do is change the story, because it is a story.
Let me ask you this then.
Okay.
Because I say it all the time. I say it in a different way. But what you're saying, I say reality is subjective.
Absolutely. 100%.
We're all crazy in our own way, and we're all totally sane in our own way, because we all have our own reality, and it could be one difference of opinion changes your whole perspective, right?
Absolutely.
But these entities, these beings, they're here to show us, how to step out of this, how to break this cycle. But who are they? Are these what you would call aliens? Are they something nefarious trying to gain your trust, like something, I don't know if you're a spiritual person, or something demonic or angelic, or are they celestial? What do you think these beings are?
So I've thought about that a lot. Again, I'm a pragmatist. I'm looking at them going, okay.
Or are they,
first of all,
are they a projection? Or are they inside?
Well, and that's a good question, because that's one thing I did notice. I'm going to make a little brief side tour going back to when I was 9, because the numbers are important.
Right.
The fact that they came into my room and there were 7 of them, right? There were 7 of them, mm-hmm. and 3 of them were male and 4 of them were female, and they were in descending age. But you notice they were 6, 9, and 12.
Right.
Increments of 3.
Right.
I was 9. the 9-year-old was missing from the male group. It was the 12-year-old and the 6-year-old. And I thought about that a lot. And also the fact that they were like clones. They were literally like clones of each other, but different sizes, like proportionally, like you just shrunk them down, right? The other day, when I was working on that painting you saw with the being, the blue being in the light, I think I sent you that painting.
Yeah.
I made different sizes of that figure because I wasn't entirely sure what size I wanted the being in the beam of light to be. And I set them down on the table and I looked at them and realized they were exactly what that. They were clones of each other, but different sizes. And it suddenly hit me. I went, wait a minute. What if it was the same being portrayed in a two-dimensional way, but in perspective? That they were in increments because they were about sequence. It was about a very specific sequence.
Yeah.
That this had to happen before this, and this had to happen before that. And the fact that there were 4 females, well, that's your tetrahedron. That's the other tetrahedron. With me, that made the male tetrahedron complete.
Right.
So it was literally showing me that geometric opposition that was necessary. They have showed me. They really must think I'm slow, or maybe I am slow, because like I'm a moron when it comes to it, I guess. Because they go, okay, we're going to show you this way, and then we're going to repeat the question this way, and then this way, and then this way, so that you hopefully between that will figure it out. So that was really significant because I realized they were using my artistic sense to. They were, instead of like if it was Albert Einstein, they would have used math. But that wasn't my thing. My thing was art. So I was like, they were showing me proportions. They were showing me using proportion and quantity. And then the color thing was really interesting because remember I said that the ones inside were white and the ones that I encountered were blue. Well, last year I finally figured that out. I'd become kind of interested in doing some chakra meditation because I was just interested in the idea of energy centers in the body and meditating and exploring that. And I don't know if you know this, but there are 7 chakras, and they are different colors.
Right.
And it is a spectral gradation of those colors. Well, I was sitting here one morning and I looked up at my little chart that I've got on the wall, and I realized that the throat chakra was exactly their color of blue. And suddenly I went, oh, they're the color they have to be to communicate. That's what the throat chakra is. It's the speaking, it's the communication one. So the question is, and when I was 2, they were kind of a pinkish rose color. Right. In other words, root chakra. What did they do? They tested me about fear. That's what it was. That's what the root chakra is. It's all about fear. So I was like, oh, they actually they're vibrating or resonating at whatever color is consistent with what their interaction is. So if they're communicating, they're going to be blue because it's that thing. Anyway, it just blew my mind that the color was the same.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And this was not something I didn't even know about before. But anyway, so I wanted to go back to that for a second to talk about the proportions and the fact that they literally were showing me not only the interactive tetrahedrons through numbers and proportion, but they were showing me that it didn't work if I wasn't part of it, because you had to have the 2 tetrahedrons. So a lot of my understanding came from possibly, so I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm just putting it out there, okay? But what if, I'm going to pose it as a question. What if the reason that they contacted me is that I'm one of them and that I'm here in the spacesuit, right? In this corporeal spacesuit, because I'm here to experience this intersection. But it's really easy to get caught up in your spacesuit and forget why you're here.
All right.
So they've been popping in to make sure that I don't forget why I'm here, and that when the mission's over, that I know how to get out again.
Yeah, that's why they gave you the map, right?
They think it's like they're going, okay, here's the key, here's the map. Yeah, we'll be me. Yeah, I'm a little worried about, you know, there's definitely an interaction coming down the road, which is probably going to be the exit.
Yeah.
And I'm not, you know, it's cool, you know, I can dig it, but they put me inside of this. So really what they did is, and I'm wondering something. I'm wondering if this is how all the intersections work, not just my own universal reality and my little micro universe that I'm experiencing here, but the larger micro universe that's also, by the way, in here, that you're in here too. Like, obviously, if we're communicating, I mean, if this is correct, we're communicating. You're having your own universe, but somehow we are like leaves on a tree. We are separate entities, but we're still all connected to the same consciousness somehow.
Right.
So, you know, even though you're having a whole life cycle on your side of the tree, and your side is facing a different direction than my side of the tree is, and you know, autumn might hit you before it hits me, or might hit me before it hits you. Who knows? And when we fall off the tree, who, you know, like we're having these lifetime experiences in the life cycle of this larger consciousness. But what I'm wondering is this what every universe is? Is this just a conglomeration of these little these little interconnected, you know, simulation bubbles that are actually all part of one much larger interaction, right?
Right.
So anyway, the thing that's interesting, I'm hoping to get to a point, and I'm thinking about maybe I need to do a book or something, so that
you do.
so that I can have the opportunity in conversations like this to talk more about what it means.
Mhm.
Because the way I've kind of come to identify it is that the first one was sort of like the evaluation. The second one was the visitation. The third one was the message, right?
Mhm.
The communication. And I feel like what's going on now is the purpose. What's it all about? Like, that's what I feel like I'm in a place right now of discovery. I've been sitting and looking at, so I've developed from studying the matrix. I don't know if I could, maybe I can send you a picture of it. I have been studying for the last 3 or 4 days deeply this construct that's based on the geometry and the message that all of the parts of the message actually fit into. It took me a long time. It's like the forest for the trees, right? Like I'm going, okay, yeah, I got this stick over here and that piece of pottery over there. And now I'm going, but this is the civilization, and the elephants danced over here. And, you know, it's the archaeology joke that people make. That says, isn't it interesting how they'll what did Eddie Izzard said? He said they dig up a series of small walls, right? And then suddenly they go, and yes, and the fountains were over here, and how do you know this, right? Well,
Right.
it's sort of a forest for the trees thing. It's like I found enough of the pieces. I've got enough of the pieces of pottery. Make sure you can still hear me. One of my earbuds just died.
I'm with you.
Okay, so I've started to assemble this pot, and the pot is telling me things about where the pot is from and how, you know, what the pot was for, and all those things, just to use the archaeology metaphor, right? So I've been looking at this construct, which I've also realized has an error in it that I have to fix, but that's neither here nor there for this. But again, it's the proportion thing. They were using proportion even in the message. If you notice the top 2 lines,
Mm-hmm.
the bottom one is shorter and smaller, and it seems to be kind of tucked in from the sides a little bit. It's because it's the outside. They're showing me the message from the point of view of the center, of being in the center of the construct. And that weird character that sort of looks like a number 3, it would be character number, the 4th character on the top line. It sort of looks like a weird sort of cursive number 3.
Yep.
Through a lot of study, I realized that they didn't. Some of their stuff is dyslexic and backwards. Like it's taken me a little bit to figure it out because it's dyslexic and backwards. that particular symbol actually is the hieratic. It's the hieratic character for the number 700, which is interesting. But it's backwards. It's the way it is. I mean, literally, it's backwards in the message. So, but I mean, I double checked and triple checked. Every element of how that character is rendered is exactly like the hieratic number 700, number for 700, ancient Egyptian. In fact, there's a lot of ancient Egyptian in there. You'll notice there's the scarab. There's the spiral on the left, which very likely is the coil of rope, which represents the number 100. Interestingly, I did a whole study. This has made me learn so much interesting. I've gone down so many interesting educational pathways. I was learning Egyptian algebra, ancient Egyptian algebra to a degree, and learning their symbols and how their number system works and how it compares. The ancient Romans clearly got their numeric system from the Egyptians. It's so obvious once you start to study the two. The methodology of how you write in Roman numerals is so similar to the way that you write in Egyptian numerals. So similar. And obviously the Egyptians did it first.
There is a lot of stuff in here that looks like there might be some kanji in there. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Looks like the eye of Horus. And then there's some words written out. It says frog.
Frog, big deer, and raven. And I've had put a lot of thought into those. And I was like, why are they written out as words?
All right.
And I think what it is that it's because they're not symbols, they're spoken. It's something about their sounds as opposed to symbols.
Like it's a phonetic kind of thing.
Exactly. And obviously one of them is my name. So
all right, yeah. Now, is that your given name, or?
It is my given name.
Fantastic name.
Okay. Hippie parents. But I might have to switch over to speaker here in a second because both my earbuds are reaching the end of their battery life. So I don't know. I'd love to hear questions, thoughts. I mean, it's an ongoing thing. This has never ended.
Yeah.
It's never stops.
Well,
so
as far as questions go and thoughts, there's a whole lot to unpack here, man. You've done a wonderful job explaining, this whole journey. And I know I asked you to give you of what is it, 45 years in 90 minutes. I was like, give me the Cliff's Notes version, and I know that's impossible, but you've done a great job doing that.
Well, thank you. I was trying really hard to stay on task and to not put in too much superfluous.
I would love to hear, or if you would write a book, I would love to read the book about the swell, trough, and wave process you talk about, because I think that's something that could be its own episode or its own, own book, like you said. Did I lose you? Are you on here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I didn't know if your earbuds went out or not.
Well, if my earbud goes out, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to switch to speaker. I don't know if that'll work. So
well, if it doesn't work, we can go ahead and wrap up part one, because I'd like to bring you on here again if you caught that.
I'd love to come on again.
Okay, I would love to have you on again. And we can expand on this and take it into a little further in depth. Is there any kind of social media or anything that you would like for people to contact you if they have questions?
Ouch.
Hang on.
Okay.
Hang on. Oh, yeah. I switched earbuds. Are you there?
Yep. I can hear you.
Okay, good. Excellent. So little more time. I switched earbuds.
That's all right. Yeah. The question that I asked earlier, that's still lingering for me. Is
okay.
On just a personal assumption kind of thing. Who do you think that these entities are they're trying to contact?
Can you hear me?
It's barely. I don't know if it'll pick up on my.
Hang on.
Okay, you're good.
Bear with me.
You're good.
You hear me?
Yep, you sound good now.
Wow. my sound is doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Hang on half a second.
Okay.
I'm gonna see if I can fix this. Can you hear me or no?
Yep, I can hear you good.
Okay, I'm gonna turn that off and see. Oh, that's up. Wow. Okay, let's see if I can find you. There you are. Okay.
Are you squared away?
Wow, that's weird. It's like, oh, wait. Hang on. How about now?
Yeah, you still sound good to me.
Okay, you know what? We're just gonna go with this. It might be a little bit tinny, but it will live. Okay, so ask me your question again.
Yeah. As far as who these entities are, where would you lean? If are they alien? As far as our concept of alien, are they something spiritual? Are they a entirely different kind of celestial kind of being, or what do you think? Who do you think is giving you these messages?
So here's what I think. I think that they do not actually exist in a corporeal sense. I think that they're energy beings of some kind, because they change form too often. And like, I think that they were changing form to make me comfortable. I think that's really what it's about. If you look at the whole experience, from flying out the window, all of that, they were being as non-threatening to me as possible.
Right.
The one I will say, whoever they are, I have never had a scary, negative, unpleasant, uncomfortable interaction with them ever. My feeling was just incredible benevolence.
That's good.
Very, very positive. My feeling, I used to think that they were, aliens, but I think that they're interdimensional. I think that they're not from here, but it does raise that question, then how did they get in here?
Right.
Right. But if, okay, let's just follow the model. Let's say that this device that they have allows them to penetrate into my intersection, right? This intersection here, this experience. Well, they're going to manifest inside of here in some sort of corporeal form, because that's what's going on here, right? Things have form. So, and even when they pull me out to be on the mezzanine inside of this thing, that's still a space-time construct, clearly inside of my bubble.
Right.
They're just allowing me to have the only experience I can have in the body that I'm in, right? I think if you pop someone out of their body and just showed them, crazy light and gamma rays or whatever, they'd go, I don't have any concept. And then especially when you're saying, yeah, there's really no space or time, they'd be like, I don't understand, but this is going forward in a linear, no, you're just having an experience. Oh, right. Okay. I need to go to bed now. So what do I think they are? I don't think they're malevolent. I don't think that they fall into any category of anything that we would describe as angels or demons. I don't think, I just don't think they're operating there.
Right.
They are having, I think they like to visit intersections, because intersections are, they're finite experiences. They have beginnings and ends. They have emotion and feeling and these different things that they're experiences. They're literally stories. Like, it's like being able to go into your favorite story,
right,
and live it for a little bit. So in a way, for them, it's almost like VR.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. That does. That makes sense. And
So
they
I don't know
have
if that
to-
answers. I don't know if that answers the question, but
it does. Whatever they are, if they're an energy being, they have to take some kind of form so you can register it in your mind.
exactly.
And even if they're not taking the form, we'll create a form for it so we can understand it ourselves. Like that's what our mind tends to do. And when I have people that, they'll say they had a Bigfoot encounter and they didn't know what Bigfoot was, they'll say it was a bear on two legs, right, running around.
Right.
That's what their mind creates it as. So however they're coming to you, how you perceive it might not be what they look like at all, but that's what you have to do. It's what your brain has to do.
Well, it's interesting because that's in alignment with the famous story of Columbus arriving in the New World, where when the ships first arrived, the Indians couldn't see them.
Right.
Because they had absolutely no context at all for, first of all, people showing up out of the ocean and riding in big sailing ships. They just had no context. And so they were invisible. So it's weird. You realize that does lend credence to my question, which is this really just a simulation? Because we have to adjust the software, right? We have to update the code in order to experience things that are outside of our experience.
Right. Yeah, simulation theory. That's another episode too, right?
For sure.
Oh man. Well, Hraefn, if you don't mind, I think we'll wrap up for this evening. And if you
Okay.
want to come back in, a couple of weeks, we can pick up wherever you want to pick up at and dive in a little bit deeper. Like I said, that the swell and trough and wave process, I think we could do an episode just on that alone. I think that's very interesting with all the points of history that you were bringing up.
Oh, and it was interesting. I went through it after I'd kind of done the mathematical charting and went, wow, it charts the rise and fall of the Third Reich. It charts it's like down the line.
Wow. Well, yeah, I would love to hear more about it because I've never heard it before. And this is something that you've been given, in my opinion. I think it's something that was shown to you. So.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And I'd love to come back. You're a very easy person to talk to.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, man. Is there any social media or any email that you want to put out there for people to contact you in case they have questions? Because sometimes, that happens.
Well, I'll throw it out there. The best way to find me is on Instagram, probably, and then just direct message me through Instagram.
Okay.
That's for now. That other things are coming, but we're not quite ready for those other things like websites and all that. But it's coming at some point here.
Good deal.
But I'm very open, and would love. I'm always interested to hear what people have to say, and it's engaging people in conversation about the topic is apparently why I'm here. So
so far.
Well, so far.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. And thanks for coming on. And if I could ask one thing of you, it would be to please write a book, get all of this, or a series of books. I would love to see all of this laid out and let us pick through what you've been given.
Absolutely. Well, and I am on a painting flow that I haven't been on for years. And a lot of this is I'm getting images for the first time of really strong compulsions to actually paint a lot of this out. So, what they looked like when they came in my room and, the vehicle and of course the message, sort of rationalized to a more cleaner version.
And you are a master artist, by the way. I was blown away. You sent me these things. I thought, man, is this like a digital art? But you're painting this stuff. This is incredible work.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Well, again, thank you so much. It's very enjoyable to be on your show, and I'd be happy to come back. You just let me know when.
I will do. Thank you so much, Hraefn. You have a good night.